Thank you for joining me again. I'm Chris and I'm going to talk to you about some books. These are everything I've read in April. It was 10 books in total. We've got a lot to get through, so let's get going. First up, we've got Saltwater by Jessica Andrews. This is a coming-of-age novel. It's non-chronological and it's in these very short chapters. Each one is like a little section. All of these things kind of come together in 3 separate narratives about this one narrator's life. It's about a girl called Lucy who grows up in Sunderland and comes from a working class background, and then she moves to London to go to university, and then after she graduates she ends up going to live in a cottage that used to belong to her grandfather in Ireland, in Donegal. It's these 3 different kind of parts of her life, but it's not told chronologically, so we get like different vignettes from each part of her life. The structure of it is really interesting. I would say at the very beginning, at first I was like not sure what's going on, and it took a second, not long, but like don't look at it and give up. It's an amazing book. I thought it was brilliant. I love a coming of age novel. It's like an incredible snapshot of youth and trying to figure yourself out, you know, moving to a different place, trying to find your place in the world. And I just believed the narrator completely. I believed her family. I believed everything that she was telling me. I was completely on board. It's about class, north-south divide, relationships between mothers and daughters, women's relationships with their bodies, growing up and searching for belonging, for your place in the world, all of those kinds of ideas. It's really brilliant. The section where she goes to university in London is like, it was just too on point. Like I was taken out by it completely. It felt like a call out. It was too much, but like in a really good way, like in a really funny, like nostalgic way. But it was just a lot. I was like, oh God, we all had the same formative experience in the early noughties. It talks about like how musicians became her and kind of everyone at school, musicians became their heroes, and then it just name checks in one paragraph like Arctic Monkeys, Art Brut, Billy Bragg, Jamie T, The Holloways, Kate Nash. Like it just goes on and on. It made me want to die, but in a really good way. So highly recommend if you want to feel kind of seen but old. But apart from that, it's a great novel. It's a great story. She's got a new book coming out in July called Milk Teeth, and I will be reading, but highly recommend this. I loved it. Next, I read The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. It's a kind of complex interweaving plot of a book which is inside a book. So The History of Love is actually a book inside the book. And there is one character who is a 14-year-old girl, and she's named after one of the characters in the book. And there is another character who is an older man who we sort of meet at the end of his life. And we find out how those 2 characters are in their relationship to the book and how they kind of end up intersecting. I loved the parts with the older male protagonist, Leo Gursky. He's an elderly Jewish man who came to America after surviving the Holocaust, and he has a variety of jobs throughout his life and ends up being a locksmith. And then after retiring, he's kind of waiting to die at this stage, and he's really paranoid that he'll die before anyone notices him on a day. Like he's constantly going out of his way to do like attention seeking, like not in a bad way, but just low-key attention seeking things, so that somebody on the day that he dies will notice him and he would have had some kind of impact on someone's life in some way. I found him just a really interesting character. Really just enjoyed like that part of the story. Also, I was listening to this as an audiobook, and the reader of Leo was so good. I loved the way that he read the story, and I loved his accent, and I just thought he was brilliant. So every time it was his turn to tell the story, I was like really engaged in it. And then the other side is a 14-year-old girl called Alma, and she is trying to find out more about this book. I don't want to give too much away. I'm like, what happened when? And I liked that part also, but I found it a little precocious child narrator, which was like on the verge of annoying. And then at the very end, we actually got her little brother narrating, who was a really strong, precocious child narrator, and that was grating. So I think I could do without like precocious children going on little adventures and working things out. Like, I don't know, it kind of annoys me. It was really good. It was like, it had moments of writing kind of beautifully about love, and was very heartwarming and poetic and quite clever, and talking about the fragility of life and loss and all of that kind of thing. But at times it did get a little bit like sugary sweet, to the point of your teeth hurting. Like, it was a bit schmaltzy at times. I think on the whole, the concept was clever and well executed, but I didn't love it as much as I maybe thought I would. I liked one of the characters so much more than the others that I was like, no, don't leave. But it was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. Good audiobook. Yeah, it was good. Next up was Girl by Edna O'Brien. This is my first time reading Edna O'Brien. I know she's a very well-known Irish writer. So I don't know to what extent this is a good example of her work. I think from what I've read in the reviews, it's that it's quite different, but uses a lot of the same themes that she's sort of been interested in throughout her career. This is set in Nigeria, and it's about a teenage girl that's abducted by Boko Haram and forced into marriage and having a child, and she eventually escapes and her life afterwards. It was incredibly brutal, relentlessly brutal in the first part, and really heart-wrenching at times, and just incredibly graphic, but it needed to be. So I didn't think it was unnecessary at all. Like, it needed to be that graphic because of the violence of what really happened to her. So to be able to tell the story, it did need to be really like unpleasantly graphic. But I didn't feel like I really connected with the main character. And on reading there's an author's note at the back where Edna O'Brien talks about her process for writing the book, and she absolutely did her research. I don't think you could doubt that. She clearly knew what she was talking about, and she spoke to a lot of different people involved in various elements of the story, and got a lot of stories from the different girls that went through the same thing as the main character. But she also said that she kind of used several of their stories to tie them together, and used references to the real things that happened to the girls in this one story. And that's kind of how it comes across. It feels like, in being an amalgamation of a variety of different characters, it's almost the main character is like a personification of several of these girls, and it takes lots of their different stories and their ways of looking at what happened to them, and kind of puts them into this one character. And I don't know if it's that made me not really connect with it, or whether it's maybe just the writing. The narrator didn't come across to me like a real person. And there's obviously a lot of discussion that can be had about whether Edna O'Brien is the correct person to write the story, whether she should write the story. It's not my place to say either way, but I wonder if the fact that Edna O'Brien is a white woman in her 80s, maybe she wasn't able to get into the mindset of a teenage girl in Nigeria. I think it was valuable to read. I do think I feel like I learnt a lot. But maybe I would have actually preferred to read this as a non-fiction, like a series of essays. I'm not sure that this worked for me. Like, the subject matter was incredibly harrowing, and I think she was effective in making that come across. I'm not sure this book could ever be described as enjoyable in any iteration of it, but it did feel valuable, at least, in that I learned something. So no regrets. Next up, this could not be more different. It's Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. This is obviously a major film, which I've never actually seen. Maybe I'll watch it now. This was a reread, so I've read this before. Couldn't really remember anything about it other than I enjoyed it. So I read it again, and it's just such a wonderful book. It's just a joy. It's a joy and like a comforting, happy, like I said on my Instagram caption, that this should be prescribed for anything that ails you, and I truly believe this. This is better than 2 ibuprofen and a hot water bottle. In fact, I think this is a very strong contender for a hot water bottle book, which I will need to give you some context on. A hot water bottle book. I read this term in my copy of The Making of Marchioness. In the intro of this, there is a mention of Harriet Lane, who is a wonderful writer, writing an intro for a copy of Mariana by Monica Dickens. And she says, it possesses the same bespoke qualities that make Dusty Answer, I Capture the Castle, Rebecca, and The Pursuit of Love such thrilling, absorbing, galloping reads. A whole world is conjured up quite effortlessly. In other words, Mariana belongs quite triumphantly to the hot water bottle genre of fiction. And then the intro says the same is true for The Making of Marchioness. Now, the first time that I read this, I was blown away by the fact that there was a kind of genre descriptor of all the books that I have really enjoyed and never quite been able to put my finger on. Like, what are those books? Like, what is it about them that makes them so good? And there have been other books that I have enjoyed in the same way and thought, yes, those are definitely in the same vibe. And hot water bottle fiction could not be a better description of that. So thank you, Harriet Lane, who is also a genius. That's what this is. Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day is a hot water bottle book. I'm saying it. Like, I don't feel qualified to add new books, but I will do it. I maybe will make my own list of hot water bottle books, because there are several others that I think are part of this great group. And it's really just like on the sofa, it's raining outside, you have a blanket over you, maybe you have a hot water bottle, you have a hot tea or coffee or beverage of your choice, and this book. That's it. That's all you need. Like, life is hard and stressful, and this book is wonderful. So in case you haven't seen the major motion picture or read this before, it's a story about a middle-aged governess who, through an accident on the part of her employment agency, ends up going to the wrong job interview. So instead of going to interview for being a governess, she ends up going to this house of a nightclub singer, and various capers ensue, and she ends up coming along on this whirlwind day as a kind of companion for the nightclub singer and her friends. So it's basically a day in the life. It's written kind of hour by hour, so it takes place in one whole day, and you get kind of timestamps throughout the whole day. She becomes this invaluable presence in their lives, and she has this big adventure, and it's just very witty, it's charming, it's a romp. I love books like this. There just needs to be more books like this that you can just sink into like a warm bath. I love it. It also has charming illustrations, absolutely beautiful illustrations. How nice is that? Why don't more books have illustrations these days? It's such a nice addition, beautiful cover. This is an extremely giftable book. You can give this to anyone. It's a wonderful present, and I don't have anything else to say about it. Invest now. Get the book. What else do you need? Next up, Victorian Chaise Longue by Margarita Lasky. This came out in 1953. It's a super short little Persephone book, number 6. So it was an early Persephone. The intro describes it as almost a play in one act, and that's completely true. It feels like it could be a play. Most of the action takes place in one place with almost one set of characters, so it really reads like it could be a play. It's about a woman that buys a chaise longue in an antique shop, and then when she lies down on it, she is transported back to the Victorian times. I want to say 100 years back, something like that, 90 years back, that kind of period of time. And she is essentially body transported into a previous time. I apparently can't read before I pick books, so I didn't know that this was like a horror, which I'm not a massive horror reader, but this was actually quite scary. Like, not in a terrifying way, but it's one of the maybe classic horror tropes that never get old, which is like body swap, not being able to escape when you've been maybe trapped inside someone else's body. And since I've read this, I've thought about it and been like genuinely scared. Like, it's quite a scary concept. It's quite quiet and simple with it, but it gets the job done. It is a scary idea. It's a bit different to what I normally read, but if you like a sort of gothic horror type thing, I think maybe this could be up your alley. It wasn't super fast moving while being really short, so it wasn't a riot, but it was interesting. I don't know if I liked it. Did I like it? I don't know if I liked it, but it was good. There you go. Look how nice the end papers are. Love it. Snowflake by Louise Nealon. First things first, she is Irish and she studied literature at Trinity. So everybody will say that she is the new Sally Rooney. It's not unvalid. This is, I would say, a book for Sally Rooney fans. And I am a Sally Rooney fan, so I don't think that's pejorative. I do think there is an element of fair enough. Like, there will be comparison when you're making recommendations. This was incredible. This was such a good book. Like, the Sally Rooney comparison just doesn't do justice to how good this book is on its own 2 feet, as it were, if books have feet. The writing isn't really that similar to Sally Rooney. It's just an incredible debut, and it's set in Ireland, and it's about an 18-year-old girl that goes to university. So there are certain comparisons that can be made. However, the way that this is written is completely original. I think Louise Nealon is a genius, and I'm completely invested in whatever she writes next. I think this was so good and so surprising. It wasn't what I thought it was, and I won't elaborate. It was just really great. I think, similar to what I said about Saltwater, I completely believe all of the characters. I believe everyone in this. I don't know to what extent they're based on maybe people she knows or her own family or her own experiences. I don't care. They're just so vivid and they feel like real people. The way people talk to each other in this book is how people actually talk. It's how friends talk or how families talk, like the in-jokes and the references to things. It's so rare to have that actually like accurately portrayed in a book, because I'm sure it's incredibly hard and it's very difficult to capture the way that people talk in like an off-the-cuff way on paper. She did such a good job of this, and the characters are all so real. I just loved it. I didn't want to put it down. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's set in Ireland, and it's about an 18-year-old girl called Debbie who has just got into university, and she's going to start commuting to university from her home on a rural farm. And she lives in the farm with her mum, who has a variety of mental health issues, and she's kind of obsessed with her dreams. She's always recording her dreams. She's got an uncle who lives in a caravan on the farm site with them there as well. So there's a kind of family element to that, and then she goes to university and she feels like she doesn't quite fit in, and because she's commuting in, she's not getting this kind of traditional university experience, but she ends up making friends with like a cool girl who actually is like smashing it at university. She's really like rocking the university experience. So she makes friends with her, and then you kind of follow her time at uni and learn more about the family and the dynamics of that. And it's just surprising the way that I thought this was going to go, or what I thought it was. It was more than what I thought it was, so much more than what I thought it was, and it was so well done. Just good. It's so good. It's so good. Read this book. It's absolutely brilliant. Like, I know there are so many books that are recommended in the genre of young women, you know, in their 20s trying to get their life together. Like, is this just going to be like more of the same? No, this is not more of the same. This is different, but it's wonderful. Apologies for the sirens. I live in London and it is literally never quiet. Then I read At the Pond, Swimming at Hampstead Ladies Pond, which is very much what it says on the front cover. It's a book of various women talking about swimming at the ladies' ponds in Hampstead Heath. Whether this is of any interest to anyone other than people that enjoy wild swimming or cold water swimming, people that enjoy Hampstead Heath, and people that enjoy swimming in the ponds at Hampstead Heath. Outside of that, I'm not sure, but by all means, if any of that sounds like it's applicable, it's a nice read. My library had the digital version of it and I kept seeing it in all the local shop windows. So I was kind of interested because I do swim at the pond. And if someone swims at the ponds, don't worry, they'll tell you. Like, they'll tell you. If someone does cold water swimming, they'll tell you. You'll hear about it. So, you know, I go cold water swimming. I go to the ladies' pond. I know. Yeah, I know. This whole book is really just various different women's experiences and just them talking about how much they bloody love the pond, which everyone does. It's wonderful. I love going to the pond. It wasn't massively varied. I'm not sure I got a huge amount of new information out of it, apart from one of the sections of the book was one of the lifeguards who talked about their experiences kind of seeing the pond from their vantage point high up and overlooking everything. And there are giant carp in the pond. And that has been living in my mind rent-free since I've read it. Thank you, lifeguard lady. Now, when I swim, all I can think of is giant carp. Like, I'm hoping I'll forget it. I forget everything. My memory's terrible. There are so many things I just simply cannot retain. But the giant carp, it's all I think about. I wish I could take it back. I didn't want to know about the giant carp. She also said they're snakes. Why would I want to know that? I don't want to know about the snakes. That's horrendous. So that was rough. But apart from that, if you're a swimmer, it's a nice little read. It's just a kind of an ode to the wonderful thing that is the swimming pond, and I enjoyed it, but I'm still hoping to forget about the giant carp. Bonjour Tristesse and A Certain Smile. The first of these is the far more famous of the two stories. It's two short novels in one book. I actually loved A Certain Smile way more than Bonjour Tristesse, and I thought that one was a standout, but both were good. This is a great summer read. Bonjour Tristesse is a story about a young woman and her father who starts dating and says he's going to marry another woman after he had been kind of alone with his daughter. That sounds creepy. It's not creepy. They had been traveling the world together and kind of as pals almost, and then this new woman comes on the scene and the protagonist becomes kind of threatened by it and tries to sabotage their relationship. In A Certain Smile, it's about another young woman who has an affair with her boyfriend's uncle. I believe Bonjour Tristesse was actually published when she was 18, and that's why it caused quite a sensation. And I think it's truly remarkable for that. I think to be so clear-eyed about youth in that, the way that she is in this book, is incredibly impressive when you're actually still in it. I think sometimes having a certain amount of retrospect makes it clearer kind of what's what, but she has done an incredible job of capturing like the cynicism of an 18 or 19-year-old, the self-obsession, the egocentrism, how when you are that age, you kind of, the entire world just revolves around you. And she's captured that perfectly. I think had I read this when I was 18, I would have been obsessed. I would have probably gone to Paris and started wearing berets, but I still enjoyed it now that I'm not 18. It's just a perfect evocation of like a summer on the Riviera. You're there, you're a cool French girl studying at the Sorbonne, you're smoking a cigarette in a Cannes hotel room with your older lover. There's so much drama in your life, but you're making it work. It was great. So atmospheric, made me want a holiday really badly, but if you're going on a holiday, ideal. But yeah, I think she really just captures the pretentiousness and the intensity of feeling of like being 19, and it's extremely accomplished for that. And I would say that it is a modern classic, and I really enjoyed it. Next, I've read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a retelling of the Iliad. Some reviews have called it a feminist Iliad. I would say you could also call it the Song of Achilles, but if Achilles was the worst person in the entire world, the absolute worst. I thought elements of this were really good, excellent, in fact. At times it was really brilliant and quite brutal, and the point of view of Briseis was just very strong, and I thought that was the whole point, to hear from her, to hear from the silent women that are not given a voice in the Iliad. However, it did then flip over to Achilles and give me his point of view, and I don't know why I needed to hear it. Why did I need to hear from Achilles again? Have we not heard enough from Achilles? I would say yes, who, as I say, in this book is the absolute worst person in the world. So why I then have to jump into his mind and be forced to hear about actually how he's wronged and his mummy issues? Why am I feeling sorry for you? I don't feel sorry for you. I found that frustrating, and I found that it took away from the main story of trying to give us this look at the women in that set of characters, and that kind of, it's a retelling, you know. First of all, do we need many more retellings of this, or is it just my fault that I've read a number of them? Was this a feminist Iliad? I'm not sure. To me it was. I think I would have preferred to just not have to hear about Achilles and his whiny feelings and to just stick to the women in the story. I also thought it tried to be quite edgy and like gritty and visceral, which came across after a while as being mildly disgusting. Like, there is just a lot of Achilles grunting about how he needs a piss, and I'm like, like, people are just constantly talking about like bowel movements in a way that, instead of being gritty, feels a bit disgusting. Must we? I guess. I don't know. I also listened to this as an audiobook, and here is me critiquing audiobooks again. It is sometimes harder to enjoy something on an audiobook, like 100%. It's a whole separate dimension where with a normal book, you're like, it's a book, I read it, the voices are in my head, none of them were annoying. Whereas with an audiobook, you're like, well, one of those people said this way. But aside from the fact that I would like to not have heard from Achilles full stop, there were some quite weird uses of regional British accents that were surprising to me. So different people from Troy had different regional accents, but multiple of them were from Troy, from the same place. So why one of them had maybe a Welsh accent and another one had a Yorkshire accent, I couldn't quite figure out, but it seemed to be, to me, used as a class signifier, which was a little bit weird. It seemed like a bit of a lazy stereotype to me, so I wasn't sure about that. And to end on a low note, we have Claire Frost, The One. I genuinely picked this up from the library because it looked like it was a light read. So that is completely on me because it's not a light read. This is a kind of romance novel where the main character's boyfriend dies after they've been dating for a few months. So let that set the standard for how perky it is. But regardless of that, you know, aside from it not being a riot, it didn't really do it for me. I didn't really love the relationship, didn't really love the other characters. It felt kind of cheesy and kind of stereotypical, and I also thought that this was really strong people with siblings propaganda. Like, huge parts of the book are about how much she loves her sisters. Like, it's literally all about her sisters, but in a way that seems really shallow, and I didn't actually believe in the relationship between the sisters. So I would have been completely down for a story about, you know, family or the relationship between sisters. And I'm an only child, so I love reading about people with loads of siblings anyway. Give me a Little Women 2K22. But this just didn't really do it for me. It just felt a bit one-dimensional. The sibling propaganda was not effective because I didn't believe in their relationship. It seemed like the main character is constantly saying that she loves her sisters, but actually she kind of treats her sisters like crap and they don't have their own personalities, and she's almost like shocked when they have things going on in their lives, and she's like, oh my god, you've had your own thoughts and feelings? No way, like that's crazy. She's kind of an annoying protagonist, and ultimately I didn't love it. Like, I appreciate trying to do a new thing in that space. Haha, you think it's going to be this, but then he dies. Easy, quick read, but I didn't super rate it. That brings me to the end of my books in April. This is a good month. On the whole, it's a strong month. I read some good stuff this month, so that was good. I've read some other good things recently that I will tell you about next time. Thank you for joining me once again. Thank you so much for being here and for watching, and I will see you next time.